Welcome back to John Miller Fishing. It is a cold, windy start of winter today. Not actually start of winter, but we finally got some cold weather. Water temperature is only about 65 degrees, so at least here in the MRGO.
Looks like a good trout, John. Pulling mighty good. Oh, sweet, sweet.
Nice.
That's a good one, John. That's a big trout. He's hooked. That is a 3+.
Beautiful fish. Slow on the bottom, 3/8 ounce jig head, matrix shad.
Hold it up, John. I want to.
Man, oh my, that's a nice one. Oh yeah. When I'm in a situation like this day at the dam where you have deep water and you have strong current flowing, there's a particular way that I always fish that, and I fish it because I found that it's been the most productive. And after fishing it that way for a while, I formulated a map in my mind about what is going on with the bait and the fish, and based on some general knowledge of trout and fish biology, I tend to believe that there is some truth in that mental map. And the mental map is that the trout are down there at the bottom of the dam. Now this dam, of course, it comes down. It's got a incline that goes down to about 40 feet, so that it drops fast initially, and then it'll drop. So it drops real fast to like 20-25 feet, and then it'll drop on down to 40. What I believe in what my mental map is that the trout are hanging around the rocks that are exposed down the bottom, so they can find breaks from the current down there at the bottom around the rocks, and they're not real willing to swim all around up in the water column because it's a waste of energy to try to chase bait around up there in the water column. So they'll only chase bait when it gets close to them. And so they're on the bottom, and the bait has to come down, and it has to get close to their heads or their faces if it falls in front of them, and then they'll attack it. So therefore, I just throw the bait out there against the dam, and I just let it fall and let it flow with the current. So you have to work a bit with your jig head weight, and you can experiment a bit to see how it is. It's probably going to be somewhere between 3/8 and 1/2 ounce. And the way it works is that if it's too heavy in the current for the strength of the current, then the current won't carry it, and it'll end up in the rocks and get snagged. And plus, the trout don't seem to like the bait if it's not moving on the bottom, and it's just, well, obviously if it's stuck in a crevice, they're not going to find it. But they seem to like it when it flows kind of naturally carried with the current, maybe moving similar speed to the current. And vice versa, if you have, say you have a 3/8 and the current is too strong, then it will get carried too high in the water column, and then you're going to go over the heads of the trout, and you're going to get few strikes. You might catch a few trout, but you're going to have much fewer. So you can see in this clip how this actually works out. And you can look at my rod tip, and you can see I do move it a little bit, but I'm just trying to keep it from getting snagged on the rocks. And the 3/8 ounce size is about right for the conditions today. meaning that I can feel it hit rocks, but it doesn't sink right down in the crevice and get snagged. I mean, I did get hung up a couple times, but if you're not getting hung up and you're not hitting the rocks and you're too high, you got too light of a jig head. You got to change that to something heavier. And I did try a heavy bait, like I often will experiment. This is very typical. Even if I know something is working, I'll try something else to experiment with. And I hadn't tried one of these heavy dark sleepers in that situation yet. And this is a 1 ounce dark sleeper, and so it'll fall right down to the bottom, and then just kind of work it through the rocks. And that's what I was doing. No success there. The 3/8 ounce jig head with that matrix shad ultraviolet on it, that's what I had success with, and success with just letting it ride the current down. You know, and I often will anchor at this spot and fish, but it can be a pain. As you can see here, I caught the anchor rope with the jig, and that happened a couple of times. It just depends on the angle of the water coming through, and so fighting the anchor rope was getting really annoying. So I just put my iPilot on spot lock to see what would happen, and man, I got to do a product review there for the Minn Kota iPilot, because that spot lock did an impressive job, kept us right where we wanted to be, the distance from the dam that we wanted to be without moving us. And it did it pretty efficiently. I was only on a setting of 3 out of 10. And a setting of 3 is a common setting for, say, moving down a shoreline, fishing a shoreline. That's not that fast, and it held us there beautifully. And then when we get hung up on the rocks in the bottom, we can just immediately move up, get unsnagged, and we're off fishing again. Or we can move over and do that. I mean, anchoring it's sometimes an inconvenient necessity, because I just don't like how it traps you at one spot. It can just be a real pain. I like to be able to move around, and we move a lot when we fish. We're not really much of an anchor fisherman at all. So kudos to Minn Kota there for their spot lock technology.
That's one of them 20s, or it's a good 7. Nope. Oh, that's a good one, John. Oh, I thought that thing was a trout. Well, at least we know there's bait there.
This is this is a cutlass fish.
What's that called?
I think it's a cutlass fish. So I have caught this strange looking fish a couple of times at this exact spot, but nowhere else in Louisiana or anywhere in the Gulf Coast have I caught this fish. It's a very unique fish, and if I look in this very informative book called The Angler's Guide to the Fishes of the Gulf of Mexico, this is a Gerald Horst and Mike Lane book. This is a very useful resource for our fishes, and I often look stuff up in here. It is called the Atlantic cutlass fish. It's also called the ribbon fish and the hairtail. And they, in their book, they have nice, besides the information like range and some biology, size, that kind of thing, they also have a section called food value. And they say that food value of the Atlantic cuttlefish is none in the U.S., although prized in Asia Atlantic cuttlefish are a good bait species, and they said it's good for cut bait and whatnot. So yeah, it's interesting. I heard that they are popular in Asia and even as sushi. So I've never run across them. Um, Maybe someday I'll try one, or if you have tried one and you want to add something in the comments about your experience, that would be welcome.
We have had some success fishing very deep in a very hard current coming through the dam, but it is hard to get onto the fish. I think it's hard to get the bait in front of the fish. There's so much current. So it's been kind of hit and miss, not very consistent. Did catch that 20-inch trout though, and that's the biggest fish I've caught in a couple of months, so very glad to have that one on the line. Didn't feel like a regular fish. It actually ran with the bait. Felt like a little bit like a redfish. So thank goodness getting to a big fish again. But I think we're gonna have to find a little more consistent bite. So we're probably gonna go into the marsh. Too much clothes on.
Oh! Come on. Come on, trouts. Why don't y'all stack up? Nice tug.
Yeah.
Nice trout.
Oh yeah.
No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't.
Oh yeah. Ooh, beautiful. 15 inch. Oh yeah. That's a nice fish.
I'll try, David.
Really nice
Back out
fish.
over the water again. Look at that, John.
Beautiful. Yeah. Another one. Yeah, baby. Oh, another nice fish. Woo! Those are beautiful. That's good. We have ended up in the Biloxi Marsh. We found some clean water here. The water's pretty dirty. That connects to Lake Bourne up by the northern part of MRGO. But here in the Biloxi Marsh, in this little lake, water's beautiful. And we finally found some trout, really nice size, like 16, a lot of 15, 16s. So happy to see those. So we're just drifting this lake, throwing, oh, they're all hitting on corks. Matrix shad, magneto, or matrix shad UV. We are hot. It's another decent, probably at least a 13. Good one?
Yeah. Oh, yes, sir. Drop it.
Nice fish. Set into some meat there, man. I'm set into it. So now that we have as many trout as we want to take home with us, we're going to see if any of the other baits can stand up to a cork. So far we've only caught fish on corks today. Oh no, here in the marsh. When we were at the dam, we caught them all on a matrix shad swim bait on a 3/8 ounce jig head. David's on a 1/4 ounce with matrix shad on it, swim bait. With a, yeah, UV. We'll see if any of these baits will do as well as the cork did today.
Yeah, it's very common for us to figure out what the trout want and then switch off of it and try something else to see if that works. Or leave a spot that has fish to go see if another spot has fish. And, you know, at the risk of sounding conceited and arrogant, we're probably fishing as much for knowledge as we are limits. In fact, we don't fish for limits because we fish enough, we simply don't need to fish. And so that's actually very freeing, because it means that we don't have to gut out something all day trying to catch a limit of trout. That's not our expectation or goal. We're just trying to figure out what's going on with the day and what we might learn from those conditions in this particular day. If we get a new bait, new techniques, I always want to try that. And one of the important things to success when you're doing this is you have to locate the fish. So you can, for instance, locate the fish with a cork and swim jig. And once you've located the fish, then switch off onto something else that you want to try out, because you don't learn much if you try a new bait or new technique where you don't know there are fish.
Well, this 15-inch trout pretty much proves that on a windy day, drifting a 3-foot deep marsh lake, the cork is superior to any of the other baits that we tested. So we got and this is a 4 Horseman cork, popping cork, about a 2-foot leader, matrix shad on looks like I got a 1/4 ounce jig head on there. But we kind of know that already, not really surprising. That's why we always keep corks in the boat.
I don't fully understand why a popping cork and swim bait is often more effective in these conditions. But if you want to watch a similar video with more analysis of how I do this kind of drift fishing, check out my video called Too Windy: How to Catch Speckled Trout by Drift Fishing. And you can follow the link here as well.
On the cork, surprise. Well, we're going to call that a day. We had a really good time. Thank goodness we succeeded. It was really windy and conditions were tough, but we came to the Biloxi Marsh. We found some clean water, and there were trout in here. Hope you are having a good fall fishing, and if you like these videos, hit the subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the water next time.